Hello, my name's Alex Ogg. I'd like to welcome you to Cherry Red TV, and I'm here to talk to you about a few of the projects that I've been involved with the label, both recently and some forthcoming projects as well. The first thing I'd like to mention is this, which is No More Heroes, which is a book I wrote a couple of years back, and it's one of many books about the punk movement of 76 onwards to 1980, which of course was one of the major reasons why Cherry Red was founded. The difference with this book is that I wanted to get away from kind of the received wisdom about what punk was all about. So although the Clash and the Pistols are in there, it was very much more focused on the smaller little labels, the smaller little geographical scenes that sometimes don't get the coverage that they should do. That took a long time. As you can see, it's a fairly dense book, but it was a fairly fulfilling task and a fairly rewarding task, because a lot of the people who were in the book hadn't previously received any kind of recognition at all. So that was the first book that I'd done for Cherry Red, but it's not going to be the last, because Ian McNay at Cherry Red very kindly asked me if I would follow this up by writing a history of UK independent labels. Now, I think what he was looking for was had a shared approach to No More Heroes in a way, in that he wanted to bring into the story all the people who were involved in that seminal UK independent labels movement of the late 70s and early 80s. Now, some of those stories are very famous. We all know about Stiff Records, about Rough Trade, about Creation, 4AD, Beggars Banquet, etc. And those are all great stories. But there are also lots of other little stories that sometimes get lost because nobody's picking up on the little labels that just did a few singles, etc. So the idea is to basically try and weave a story around both the bigger independent labels and the smaller ones. And to that extent, one of the things I'm doing here is inviting people who are involved in independent record labels in the late 70s and early 80s, and it was such a boom time for the independent labels that there were quite a lot of people to get in contact with me, if at all possible, so that we can, get that anecdotage and those memories down for posterity. And if anybody wants to contact me, my email address is alex.og90@ntlworld.com, and I'd be very pleased to hear from you. In terms of the book, it ties in with many other things. As people may know, Ian McNay is very much somebody who's carried the torch for the independent label scene. He was the one that launched the independent chart way back in the day. And he's very much somebody who wants that history to be preserved, to find all these people who did great things, often on limited budgets, often begging, stealing and borrowing to get things done. And he wants that to be documented and told as the story that it is, which is quite a revelatory story for the British music industry at large, because some of the people involved in those labels have gone on to do very, very major things in the music industry, but almost, their footsteps are more interesting in the early days when it really was a free-for-all and people could go with it and take risks, and that's how Cherry Red started, and that's how so many of the other labels started. So it's going to be another big, exhausting project. I'm well underway, but I'm always looking for more, and the idea is to chisel it down into what we hope can be a definitive take on all that story. And as I say, contributions are most welcome. One of the other things I wanted to touch on briefly is my involvement with Cherry Red also now extends to editing their bi-monthly magazine, which you can see here again. These are the 4 issues we've done so far. It's called My Favourite Flavour. And what we try and do in the magazine is actually reflect the breadth of music output that Cherry Red now has, because, as you will probably know if you're watching this, there are now several subsidiary labels, several of which are very well established in terms of their genre and what they do. We have L Records, 70s Records, Esoteric, RPM, Cherry Red imprint itself, Revola, run by Joe Foster, etc. And what we're trying to do is actually give decent publicity to each of the releases, because there are so many now that there's a chance that some of the good things that do come out, and there are a lot of good things, actually get missed. So for example, we're trying to give a page in the magazine to each of the labels, and obviously, we can't reflect even the number of releases by one of the labels in any 2-month period, because there are so many. But we can pick up, things that are interesting. So, for example, in the current issue, we have a Cassius Clay CD on Revola. We have Esoteric, who are doing Keith Hartley, and Elle. I'm trying to think what Elle did this month. Yeah, I mean, David Axelrod, obviously, is a major release. And 70's doing their ongoing Osmonds reissue campaign. So we're trying to do that, and I'm trying to build it up also with some editorial. So, I spoke to Mark Stratford this issue about RPM Records. We did an interview with Principal Edwards Magic Theatre, and there's also a roundup of releases by the indie band Cud, because all their stuff is again coming out on Cherry Red. So the idea is, if we can, to reflect the diversity of the label and give a bit of editorial to all the things that are happening under the Cherry Red umbrella. And again, I can, every time I look at this, I think, well, I haven't mentioned our Stevie Moore, which is obviously a big release for us, and also the Perfect on Pop series, which very fits in with my kind of musical background, in that it's dedicated to unearthing some of the records that John Peel would play, which nobody else ever would, of course. And in terms of that, that's a great series, which should have some of the stuff that just doesn't get issued on compilations elsewhere, and it's very beautifully annotated. So there we go. Those are the three things I wanted to mention. The No More Heroes, which I think is a good reference book for that time, and the forthcoming independent book, which is my main focus at the moment, and also the Cherry Red magazine, which costs, I think, very little for you to access. I think you get a free copy if you send in, and then I think you really only have to cover the postage costs for the rest of it. And I do implore you to get hold of a copy if you can. Thank you very much.